at Digital Health and Care Wales. Just for the record, I'm planning to finish today's public session by about 12:30 at the latest, so there should be time for a short break before our private session, which is scheduled to start at 12:35 p.m. A special welcome to the Director of Primary Community Care and Mental Health Digital Services, Sam Hall, who's attending for agenda item 4.3, the Digital Eye Care Programme, to Nathan Couch, who is joined by Andrew Doughton and Mike Whiteley to present the Audit Wales reports, and to Sian Williams, Head of Financial Services and Reporting, who'll be supporting Claire Osmondson-Little in Mark Cox's absence. Now, I have agreed to move the Audit Wales Committee update, that's agenda item 1.4, which will include the position on the year-end accounts. We're moving it to the start of today's agenda before we proceed through the consent items, as Nathan and his colleagues are required to attend a staff conference at the same time. So our normal agenda will resume following this item. Now, please be advised that we are holding this meeting virtually. The meeting will be recorded and this recording posted on DHCW's website. And as usual, committee meeting papers will be available for members of the public to access via DHCW's website. We have a full agenda, but I'd like to advise you that we are planning a short break, around 10 to 15 minutes, built into today's public session, and that's planned between sections 4 and 5. So we'll have a short break also between the public and private meeting. On to apologies then. I have received apologies for absence from the Associate Director of Finance, Mark Cox. On to declarations of interest, not been notified of any prior to today, but this is your opportunity. Are there any declarations of interest to declare on any aspect of the agenda? If not, then we'll move on to section 2 of today's agenda and to the Audit Wales Committee update. I'd like to warmly welcome Nathan Couch and his team, and to Andrew Doughton in particular, who's just taken over from Darren Griffiths as DHCW's Audit Wales Performance Manager. But I'd like to take this opportunity to express our appreciation and thanks to Darren for his contribution and support over the past 3 years. So diolch yn fawr I Darren, but Andrew, croeso, you are very welcome. So I will now invite Nathan to take the lead on the Audit Wales update along with colleagues. And we are asked to note the update for assurance. So over to you then, please, Nathan. Diolch yn fawr.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everyone. So yeah, I'll take the update and then I'll hand over to Andrew and Michael between them, provide an update on the which is on today. So the progress report provides the Audit and Assurance Committee with an update on our current and planned accounts and performance audit work at DHCW. It also provides additional information on other relevant examinations and studies published by the Auditor General and relevant corporate documents published by Audit Wales. Just a brief update on the accounts audit then. So just to say that with detailed planning work was completed during March, and the full audit will commence on receipt of the financial statements on the 3rd of May. In terms of our performance audit work, our core structured assessment, annual audit report and workforce planning reports were presented at the February committee. Then our deep dive review of cost savings is underway, and we intend to present the report at the committee meeting in July. Our deep dive on digital and our local review on stakeholder engagement arrangements are currently in the scoping phase. Finally, exhibits 3 and 4 in the update provide links to other relevant examinations and studies published by the Auditor General and additional information published by Audit Wales since the last committee update. So quite a brief update today, but happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Nathan. Diolch yn fawr. Can I open it to questions or observations from colleagues? I can't see any hands up. Chris Darling, Board Secretary. Chris, let's turn to you first.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, morning, everyone. I was just going to comment on the from firefighting to future-proofing report that was included as a link within the papers. A couple of points I think really pertinent for us as an audit committee. The first was around the cost of failure in governance and financial management, and the kind of risk that with squeezed financial and human resources, the potential for governance and service failure increases. So just something to be aware of, I guess. And the other area that stood out for me was the section on the upping the bandwidth on digital transformation, and the concern expressed within the report about the pace of harnessing digital transformation across public sector. Again, feels quite relevant for us organisationally, but I think the report itself was a really good report, an interesting read, and useful context for us. It was just a comment, Chair.
Thank you for highlighting that, Chris. I think the nods around the table are in support of your comments. I think very, very helpful. And I can see Claire's hand up now as well. Claire?
Yeah, no, I would agree. The firefighting to future-proofing is excellent report by Welsh Audit Office. Page 13 that does mention the bandwidth and on digital transformation, again, is something that we echo all the way through our conversations with our colleagues at the moment. I also thought it was good because it highlighted the importance of getting good foundations in the IT technology, and how the replacement of some antiquated IT systems should be a priority. So I do think I would echo Chris's comments. It's an excellent report, and it's something that that we should refer to in some of our reports going forward, and recognise the importance of it. So, and equally, I would also acknowledge that the board effectiveness report on the BCU, again, we've looked at the effectiveness of our board, Laura, and it's heartening to see that we're doing well, and it's reflected in that. But again, I think the contents are good to indicate the threat in the event that we don't get it right. So I think, again, another useful report that we can refer to going on. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Claire. And I think perhaps that's something that we can highlight to the wider board for learning going forwards, because there are a number of pertinent points there. If there aren't any other questions or comments, just one final one from me. It's about the uplift to the audit fee in this current new financial year. It's gone up to 6.4% uplift, which is probably about twice the level of uplift that DHCW has been awarded for both capital and revenue spend. So I just wondered how you justify that 6.4% uplift at Audit Wales. Andrew, perhaps you might like to come in on this? Yeah,
thank you, Chair. This is something which has been, I guess, a challenging decision for us. Our fee is comprised of sort of two main elements. One is sort of how much we charge for our daily rate, so it's an uplift in sort of our daily costs. The other part is the quantum of work that we do. So we went through a consultation in November around the uplift, and that was at 6.4%. In terms of the reasons for that, I suppose the audit quality is one particular aspect. The audit risk profile across the NHS and wider bodies is significant at the moment. So to compromise the delivery and independent assurance at that point in time when the sector is facing such significant risks would potentially undermine our ability to deliver our work. And if I'm going to be honest, we've been facing a huge amount of competition, and we've had a loss of staff from Audit Wales over, particularly across the border to England. That's we've experienced over the last year. That has compromised our timeliness of our delivery. And just to put it in perspective, in England, they undertake a consultation on the fee rates at the same time as we do. It's called the Public Sector Audit Appointments Authority, which undertake that. They have increased their fees by 151%. We've increased ours by 6.4%. So the audit risk of us losing more staff across the border, because there is a substantial shortfall of auditor resource over in England, is a significant risk to us. So we had to do something to basically, I'm sure as DHCW sort of understands, with specialist digital expertise, the market is not the same, it's not maintained just within Wales. We're competing with commercial sector and across the border as well. So it's a difficult decision we've had to make, but unfortunately, we've had to reach that position.
Thank you very much for that explanation, Andrew. That's really helpful to help us understand the thinking behind that decision. And I can see Claire wants to come in again. Claire.
Yeah, so like yourselves, we also have high wage inflationary pressures to source the appropriately skilled staff, and actually the complexities that we also now need to deal with as a result of those increased audit requirements. I think the audit committee is aware of how challenging that was on our team. But like yourselves, we have to innovate, and I think innovation is a key stream within Welsh Audit Office. So I think I'll be interested to learn how you will, through technology and digital, be looking to improve your efficiency and effectiveness, and actually what we as DHCW can learn from that. So I understand you're in a conference later, but it would be interesting to see how we can use technology to mitigate the risks that we're seeing in attracting staff and improving the overall effectiveness, which is something, obviously, with the pressures we've got, financial pressures we have in DHCW, we are obviously looking at as well. So thank you for that.
Diolch, Claire, and thank you to the team from Audit Wales then, and we look forward to working with you as we proceed through the financial year, and we'll be catching up with you again at the review of the accounts in early May. Diolch yn fawr, colleagues. So we will move on then now to
Sorry, I think we were meant to present that audit plan as well.
Oh, okay, yes. Do you want to come in with that now then? Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, members. I'll kick off with the audit plan and cover off the aspects relating to the financial statements audit. Then I'll hand over to Andrew, who'll take you through the performance work, if that's okay.
Fine, thank you.
I'll just quickly take you through the key points in the report. So on page 6, it sets out our responsibilities for the audit of the financial statements, which is to give an opinion on their truth and fairness and of the regularity of income and expenditure in the accounts. And we're also required at the end of the audit to certify a return to Welsh Government for whole government accounts purposes. On page 7, we've got a useful Your Audit at a Glance summary, which kind of covers the main elements of the audit with further details on each area later in the plan. Moving to page 8, this shows the materiality levels we have set for the audit of the financial statements. A misstatement is considered material if it could influence the decision of the users of financial statements. This is a key audit standard that is followed across the profession, and we've set the materiality for the whole of the financial statements audit as 1.508 million. But as you might expect, we set lower materiality levels for those areas of the accounts that may be more sensitive and more in the public interest. And you'll see on the bottom of page 8 there, we've got those in terms of remuneration disclosures and also related transactions. Moving on to page 9, this sets out the significant risks identified for the audit. Both of the risks shown are presumed risk under auditing and accounting standards. And just to confirm, there is nothing specific we've identified in our planning work relating to DHCW for those risks. They are just mandated risks that you will see present in all audit plans at all bodies. On page 10, this shows the other areas of audit focus. So these are other areas we've identified from our planning work, which are lower risks. They are not significant risks. And these are just things that we need to cover off as part of the audit. And then finally, on page 11, this sets out the key dates for the audit of the financial statements. I think as previously discussed, the draft accounts, I think, are due on the 3rd of May. So we will commence our audit as soon as we receive those draft accounts. And I've kind of agreed a plan with Mark and Sean to hopefully conclude that work by mid to late June, with reporting to this committee. I think on the 9th of July is thanks Laura, yeah, it's the 9th of July where we'll be reporting our findings. I'll hand over to Andrew for the performance sections. Ruth, sorry, did you want to come in at that point? Sorry.
Yeah, I just thought while we were talking about timescales, Chair, if I can ask the question now, it might be helpful. Given the comments that we just made about the struggles in finding staff and appropriate staffing levels, obviously we know last year things were delayed slightly. So I was just wondering whether we can be assured that you guys have got the resource you need this year. Obviously, we'll be working very hard to have the resource to support you, but that we can expect things to run on time this year without any delays.
Yeah, certainly happy to provide that assurance. Yeah, we've got a full team in place already. You may recall seeing David Tomlin at this committee previously. So David's been recently promoted to audit lead. So it's great that we've managed to retain David on the audit with that experience and knowledge that he's got of DHCW, which is fantastic. And we've also got another couple of team members who've also worked previously on the audit. So we've got those resources in place now. So I don't want to say, I don't want to prejudge anything, but not finding anything significant.
I know, never say never. I think we would say never say never as well.
If all goes to plan, yes, absolutely. If we find anything significant in our audit work, obviously that may cause delays, but we're not anticipating anything at this stage. I think previously discussed at the committee, Mark and Sean and Claire are really great in coming to us with anything that's on their mind, anything they're thinking through, any issues that they might want to view on in advance of preparing the draft financial statements. So we have those conversations throughout the year. So we get to this point at a no surprises kind of stage. So nothing should come out of the woodwork at this stage. But as you say, Ruth, we can't really say never. So yeah, hopefully that gives some assurance. Brilliant, thank you.
Okay, so if I take over from the performance element of the work, we've got 3 core elements of the work here this year. The structured assessment, which I'm sure you're familiar with, that covers board and committee cohesion and effectiveness, corporate systems of assurance, corporate planning arrangements and financial planning. So it is very, very similar, I think, than it has been in previous years. I think probably if there is any difference that we might do this year, because you have the Wellbeing of Future Generations duty, we might look at that a little bit as part of the work. But other than that, as I understand it, in previous years, the structured assessment has been delivered sort of very effectively. I think we found it a very smooth process and there are no major changes to the approach. So I think that will go very well. We have a deep dive review, which is focusing on investment into digital systems. I think that's obviously going to be more core. We're doing that across all 12 bodies, but I think that's more core for obviously Digital Healthcare Wales. And I think because of that, we'll look at try to prioritise that in the programme to undertake the work at the ACW in advance of the other bodies. So we're in the process of scoping that. And I think at the moment, our intent is to look at it from 2 angles, which is the approach that the organisation has to support the wider NHS Wales with its digital programmes, and also look at the approach the organisation is taking to use digitally within the organisation itself, just to support normal corporate and operational delivery. And then the final aspect of work is following on from last year. So that's on stakeholder engagement arrangements. Last year, the quantum of work available wasn't enough to be able to complete a local review to significant quality. So we're using some of the fee from last year and this year to do a bit more substantial review on stakeholder engagement arrangements. And I think as part of that, we'll be looking to speak to a range of stakeholders across Wales to gain some feedback as well. So happy to take any questions on that programme.
Thank you, Andrew. That's a very clear presentation of the plan for the year ahead. Audits which no doubt will be extremely helpful to us going forward, especially looking at the wider digital challenges facing the whole of NHS Wales. I can't see any hands up, so I think you've explained the programme going forward very clearly. So unless there are any observations, can I just thank you very much for joining us this morning, for your engagement, and we very much look forward to working with you over the forthcoming months. Diolch yn fawr I chi gyd, and have a good staff conference.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we will move on then to the next part of today's agenda, and to ensure that we focus on key business critical areas, we are going to use the consent agenda. I assume that you've all had the opportunity to read the papers under this section, and can I just check whether there are any issues that you want to move for discussion from the consent to the main agenda? I can't see any hands up. In that case, we'll move then to the consent agenda and assume that committee members are happy to approve and note all the items as requested. Specifically then, we are approving the minutes, item 2.1 from the committee meetings held on February the 13th, both public and private abridged minutes. We are noting the NHS Wales Shared Services Partnership Committee Assurance Report, that's item 2.2, and it was very helpful again to see the NHS Wales Shared Services Partnership IMTP priority areas for the next 3 years. We are noting the contents of the forward work plan, item 2.3, which includes items scheduled to come to future committee meetings. We are approving then the 2 policies under item 2.4, which are the standards of behaviour and the shared parental leave policies. We are noting that there are no losses and special payments to report. And I'll just confirm now with Claire that this position has not changed, Claire?
No, I don't think so. I'll just check with Sian if there was anything else she wanted to add on that one.
No, there's no losses or special payments to report, and we'll be reviewing this as part of the year-end process, Marianne.
Thank you, Sian. And finally then, we are noting the standards of behaviour report, item 2.6. And I should add that it was particularly pleasing to see here that we've now received and captured over 94% of Band 8A and above declarations of interest. And that's in addition to the 44% of declarations from the wider members of staff. I think that's good to see progress in that area. So thank you for that, colleagues. I will now then move us to the main agenda meeting business, opening with agenda item 3.1, which is the action log. Now you'll see from your papers that there were 2 actions captured from our last committee meeting on the 13th of February, and both of which I'm pleased to note are complete. Can I just check whether you have any questions in relation to those actions completed? No, then we are being asked to note the status of the action log, and that brings us to the end of section 3. So we'll move on to the internal audit progress report, which is agenda item 4.1. And it's my pleasure now to hand over to Stephen Cheney at the NHS Wales Shared Services Partnership internal audit to take us through the plan. So thank you, Stephen. We are being asked, of course, to note the plan. Diolch yn fawr.
Thank you very much, and good morning, everyone. We are approaching the end of the 23-24 audit plan. A few reviews left, largely impacted by some work on other areas. Otherwise, I think we would have been finished by now. But nonetheless, we are picking the work up and taking it to the finish line. We've got 3 reviews left, of which one is significantly progressed, and all of the work is largely complete as well. And with that in mind, we started looking to the opinion for the year as well, and I'm pleased to say that we're looking at reasonable assurance again this year, and quite a comfortable reasonable assurance. So far, we've issued 3 substantial and 5 reasonable rated assurance reports, which is comparable to previous years, give or take 1 or 2 substantial assurance reviews. But nonetheless, this is in line with expectations. We are focusing on key risks, particularly around operational delivery of programmes of work. So we would be expected to be issuing reasonable assurance overall. What I might do, Marion, if it's okay, I shall go through each of the audits and then come back to the audit plan as it's next on the agenda. So I'll start off with the iCare Services review for DHCW. This was an ad hoc piece of work that we picked up. We examined the arrangements that were being taken by DHCW to facilitate the transfer across of the iCare Services contract. From the perspective of DHCW, as much as possible has been done to mitigate the risk of uncertainty and the lack of information that's come across. So it's literally what we would expect to be done has been done. We did raise an important matter, and this applies to a number of other programmes of work as well, particularly around multi-partner contracts. And that is, what are the governance arrangements in place, something which should be established from inception of the work to help facilitate the delivery and establish the responsibilities and accountability prior to commencement. And we recognise it wasn't necessarily possible with this review, but it's something certainly I think to consider going forward as well. So if I may, I shall pause on that. Welcome any questions regarding that review, and then I shall proceed. Question?
Thank you. Let me bring Chris in first, then, if I may. Chris?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it was just to, well, I really thank Stephen and the team for taking on this audit at short notice. I think it was an important one from a DHCW perspective to, have assurance that we have been through the right processes since the transfer of the programme. It is probably worth noting, Marion, this does sit alongside another internal audit report that's being undertaken, not finalised, so not here today, but I think probably important to consider this in the context of that when that does come back to the committee. And I'll leave any detailed comments for Sam in terms of this report.
Thank you for that, Chris. And yes, it's probably worth just reminding the committee that I met with Simon Cookson before today's meeting to get an update on that jointly sponsored internal audit into the iCare digitation programme, jointly sponsored with Cardiff and Vale University Health Board. You'll recall that that audit work was commissioned in October last year, and I was keen, as I think we shared at our last committee meeting, we were keen for this report to be seen alongside the Digital iCare Programme Governance Internal Audit, which we are receiving today. Now, unfortunately, the jointly commissioned report has not yet been finalised in time for today's committee meeting, but I am informed that the draft report has now been initially issued to Cardiff and Vale, and therefore we are expecting a verbal update in the private session of today's meeting. So with that preliminary introduction, then I will take questions and then perhaps turn to Sam for her response, unless you prefer to come in straight away, Sam. Or
No, I'm fine. Happy if Ruth wants to jump in.
thank you. Then come on in, Ruth. Diolch.
Diolch, and thanks for this report. I think the bit that I'm interested in, it's a comment that Chris made. It's good that we've done all the right things since the programme was transferred to us, but I just wonder what we need to be doing before programmes are transferred to us, because we've had a number of these come over now, and I wonder, Stephen, if you've got any comments on that from your findings, because once we've got something, it's too late. We've got to do something with it. But actually, is there something that we could be doing that we've learned from the programs that we've taken on ahead of time before we have to transfer them over to us? So I was just interested in any learnings that you've come across, Stephen, in your reviews.
Thank you. If I may, just before I answer the question, just like to clarify a particular point. And we've shared the draft report with our colleagues in procurement for fact checking prior to Calafell, but I will still be providing an update within the end committee as well. Yes, a very good question. It is a key risk. It's something we also touch upon within the programme management review as well, around what DHEW is accepting as it comes across, and where the inception of these programs or initiatives come from as well. And without jumping ahead on the program management, when we see there's an instruction to undertake this work rather than a traditional route of a business case, and this is something which I think DHEW will need to look at a bit more going forward as to how you quantify success and challenges associated with that. I honestly think that without having the governance structure, I apologise if my network's dropping off. I keep getting an error message come up, but I shall carry on. Really, before anything comes across, there needs to be that governance structure set up, which almost signs off is not the right word, but approves that handover process. It scrutinises those challenges and risks that exist at that point of transfer, and there's a route to manage those and provide assurance to the board as well that they are being managed before being accepted. Without doing that, I can't see how you could manage those challenges. Otherwise, you will just keep accepting programs that have incumbent risks attached to them, and it'll be a similar situation each time. So I think before it comes to us, there needs to be an establishment of, right, this is what we're accepting. There's a problem attached to this. We can't accept this because of that, and so on and so forth. It has to be something like that, I feel.
Thanks, Stephen. My follow-up question would be about the money, but Claire's already got her hand up, so.
Let's say thank you for that response, and there clearly are lessons to be learnt. But I'll turn to Claire now for the next question.
Yeah, and my reflections would be actually both. When I've worked in business before, when we acquire things, you do due diligence before you acquire them, and then you have a forecast plan of those values, and then when they come across, there's some sort of formality and governance and sign off, and then there's the reality, and inevitably there will be differences that we can then track. So it's for me, it's very difficult to do when you don't have ownership or insight, but I think we're all part of the NHS. So it's really about how do we, going forward, have that due diligence up front that both parties recognise, and then through, you're right, Stephen, through the right governance processes, it's then how do you action those. So I think we've learned a lot over the last 3 years with the programmes that have come in play, and this would give us a bit more foresight going forward in the event that we do take on more, which, who knows, but the approach that we would want subject before we would agree to absorb those particular programs or projects, so that, you know, as a board, we have more insight into the financial implications and the governance implications of those particular transfers. So I think we've learned a lot in the last 3. And Stephen's report is right, the governance, but Ruth, you're right, we need some sort of foresight and due diligence and some governance sign off and the transformation of the programme into DHCW. So
yeah, Claire. Chris Darling.
Chair, it was just a comment building on Ruth's question, and I think the report alludes to whether local organisations should deliver national digital programmes, and should that be the default position. There is a statutory organisation within DHCW now where the default, I think, should be for any national programme it's delivered through the Special Health Authority, and I think that was a helpful point, I think, that the report made in that context.
Thank you, Chris. And I'll just invite Sam Hall, if I may, for any final observations, Sam, from what you've heard in today's discussion, and also the advisory report on the iCare digitisation programme.
No, thank you, Chair. Again, I'd just like to thank Stephen. He and I worked quite strongly. We met a couple of times while going through this, because, and you know, understanding it wasn't a simple audit to do. But I'm really pleased with the outcomes, actually, because it took a lot of establishing inside the HCW actually to get this up and running again. So the recommendations are really clear, and I do, again, you know, echo what everyone has said. We needed to have a lot more information, I think, and potentially, you know, I don't think we really had a choice, because this is a national programme, and ideally, I guess it would have started with us, but it didn't, for lots of different reasons. And we didn't have all of the information, and actually we still don't have all of the information, some, you know, 9 or so months on from when we started this. But what we do have now is enough information to go forward, and I think that's where we are now. We've done a lot of learning from what's happened, and now we're in a position where we can make a very clear presentation of what needs to happen in the future, knowing that our governance and what we've set up to do that will support that delivery. That said, I don't believe that there's necessarily a pot of money to allow us to do that, and it could be that we are thwarted by finance. And if that's the case, then at least it will be made on the judgment of the right documentation and an assessment of the need for the programme to continue. Had we not gone through this process, I don't think we would be in that position to be able to clearly articulate that. So I think that puts us in that good position. But I think it will be interesting for the other joint audit findings to come out, because I think, without looking back, without hindsight, what we need to do is to make sure that whatever comes out of that other report, we feed it into any lessons learned for new ones, because that will be the biggest win I think we can get from this now, is to go, let's potentially, whatever we've learned, not do some of those things again with something so critically important as this. But yeah, it's just a thank you. We are moving onwards as well as we can, and we've had, you know, amazing support from our audit colleagues. As I said, Stephen, I love an audit, but this one was particularly challenging but very useful for us, so thank you.
Thank you, Sam. You heard those comments from across the piece, a very, very helpful and useful audit. And thank you again, Stephen, for leading on that piece of work, which we are being asked to receive for assurance. Unless there are any other points to be made on that, the iCare audit, can we turn then to the programme management audit, which has a rating of overall reasonable assurance, and both Ivan Evans and Michelle are here to respond also. But I'll turn to you first, Simon, Stephen, to introduce the audit, if I may. Diolch yn fawr.
Thank you. Thank you. Program management is a review that we're likely to do most years now going forward, some years more and some years less. It's a sort of key area that we were interested in. This year we focused on DSPP and in particular the All Wales app. With this review, we assess the governance arrangements in place and the the type of project arrangements that were underway as well. They do lean more towards agile delivery, but that is a good thing. There are 12-week packages of work, there are regular reviews, there's risk management, everything that we would expect is in place and pivoting as and when required as well. We did raise a recommendation over some of the deliverable timeframes and whether the detail still remains appropriate. But overall, we actually very happy with the controls and arrangements in place. The next point, however, is the one I was sort of alluding to within the previous review as well. Typically, a program of work would go underway based on a business case that would be set up. There may be financial benefits, efficiency, a range of other tangible outputs that can be measured, and a reason for this program of work to progress. In this instance, it was a ministerial directive for the rollout of the app. So the traditional measures by which it might be assessed against do not exist. So alongside this, one of the recommendations we raised is a focus on how DHCW going forward, how they assess the value and prioritization of program work. This should include financial, of course, but also maybe non-financial measures. Maybe there's an impact of value quotient that can be calculated, some form of measurable output to, at the very least, help prioritize resources within DHCW towards key areas of deliverables, or maybe how a program work might be prioritized in terms of deliverables on an urgency basis as well. So a number of reasons for doing that, but we do think there's benefit going forward now, particularly as a lot more of this work, certainly the existing programs of work may come through via this route. So we think there's quite a bit of value in that, and thus we raise a recommendation to that effect as well. But otherwise, overall, it was a positive review. What we expect to be in place was in place. Just a couple of recommendations to help enhance that overall. So welcome any questions at all.
Diolch, Stephen. Are there any questions or comments for Stephen and indeed perhaps for Ivan as well? Ivan?
Diolch yn fawr, Marian. Yeah, if I could make some comments. I'm very grateful to Stephen and the team and to the DSPP team for the report. And I think it, well, for me anyway, it was a very important report. And I'll just outline briefly why I wanted to prioritize the report on DSPP and why I was looking for assurance on DSPP. And the main reason is that DSPP is quite different to many of our other programs. Firstly, we are developing our own code, whereas usually we purchase code or we purchase a product from others. Secondly, we are providing the NHS Wales app for the whole of NHS Wales directly from DHCW, not through health boards, through a master services agreement or a framework arrangement or deployment orders. We are simply being funded by Welsh Government to provide nationally across the whole of Wales. And thirdly, and probably the most important, as everybody on the call I'm sure will know, we have ambitions to move towards a product operating model which has got a lot more agility in it, and DSPP is where we're trying to meld that with public sector expectations of a strategic outline case and a outline business case and a full business case, which usually has a very, very high level of definition around the time and the money and the benefits or the outcomes. And product doesn't quite work like that. In product, you would fix the time and the money, and then you try to accelerate time to value, and you try to maximize the value within those constraints that you have, and you iterate and you work closely with users to maximize the value that you can achieve with the money and in the time that you have. And that's quite difficult to map back to a traditional 5-year or longer business case. So I'm relieved and pleased that it's come out as a reasonable assurance, and I'm especially pleased that the 12-week work package cycle, which is at the heart of the way that we manage the DSPP program, has been called out as an example of best practice, because we're going to need to do this more in other programs. The more we move to product, the more we're going to need to do this. And then finally, I'll just say in response to the recommendations, there are 4 recommendations in there. The biggest and the first of those is about business justification case and setting these things out. As board members will know, we are taking a business justification case to government for funding from April of next year. That goes to the programme board in its final format this afternoon. And then it will be going to the DHEW Programmes Delivery Committee at the beginning of May in around 4 weeks. And that is a more formal, traditional business justification case which sets out benefits, because there's a degree of stability in the app now, so we can have more certainty around how we are predicting and measuring that. But I'm really pleased, with the progress of the app. But I'm very grateful to the team. And for the assurance that we've given, because I think it was very important. We're doing something which is novel for us in some ways, and that's where we should be focusing our efforts on assurance.
Diolch, Ivan. Thank you. A very positive response there from Ivan, and really pleasing for DHCW to receive the overall reasonable assurance for the reasons that have been outlined. So thank you again, Stephen, for working on this audit. Lessons learned from both audits are going to be important going forward and extremely helpful as we develop our programme of work. I can't see any other hands up, so unless there are any comments, I'm going to turn to you, Stephen, again and ask you to present the internal audit plan for 24-25, if you will. Diolch.
Thank you very much again. So item 4.2, the 24-25 audit plan for next year, is presented to committee for both discussion and if satisfied, approval as well. I will provide a final copy for information at the next committee as well, but it's an opportunity to welcome any input from members as well. It's been prepared on a similar basis as previously. It's risk-based. It's links into work that we do across Wales, audit trends that we found, Welsh Health circulars that come through, and other legislative requirements from the Welsh Government. So a variety of different avenues. This year we have 13 audits, which is similar to this year actually, that we're just completing. There is one capital review within this one over energy management. We had one this year, decarbonisation, which we did as part of the general audit plan. So it is a similar layout and type of audit as we've done this review. We have this year we have coverage across a number of key areas: financial, operational, strategic, etc. We do take into account risks facing other organisations as well, particularly given DHCW's role as a national service provider. So we do take those into account when developing the plan. And there is a particular focus on right across Wales, actually, with a number of other draft plans as well, multi-partner contracts, programmes of work, and I suspect we will look at this more over the coming years as well. So as mentioned, the plan is presented for discussion and ultimately approval. But of course, if there are any further changes or suggestions, I will present a final copy at the next audit committee as well. And if there are any questions, I'm very happy to take them.
Diolch, Stephen. It's been really helpful to have that plan completed at the start of this new financial year. I can see I've got a hand up from Ruth. We'll start with you, if I may, Ruth.
Diolch, Chair. Thanks, Stephen, for presenting that. I'll ask the same questions to you around resource and ability to deliver the plan from your perspective, as I did to our external colleagues, because I think one of the things that we've really benefited from this year is the flexibility to be able to ask you to go and look at areas of concern. And I have no reason to expect we wouldn't want to do the same over the
Yeah.
coming year for things that we do not know what they might be. So just a question around the overall kind of resource bit, because obviously we'll be working very hard again to provide the resource from our side of things to support the audits.
Thank you. Yes, resource from our perspective, it isn't an issue. We would have largely completed the plan this year if it were not for some extended pieces of work that we've undertaken. We have capacity, as always. In fact, the position of 13 audits is set as such that we would have contingency to likely pick up an additional 1 or 2 reviews if required as well. We tend to try and keep similar auditors on each client because of the crossover of knowledge. So for DHW, we would always have 2 or 3 dedicated auditors picking up the work, some of which comes from our IT audit team as well. They sit separate to us. They're not impacted by anything within our team. So certainly from a resource point of view, we there isn't an issue at this point in time. And yes, we will have contingency to pick up any evolving risks or areas of concern as well going forward.
Thank you, Stephen and Claire.
I thought, Stephen, and I'm sure you worked alongside Chris, that I think there's a good balance with the plans and the diversity of topics you're going to cover. So on pages 13 and 14, which breaks that down, I thought that was really well put together and well thought out. So yeah, happy to support over the year. And yeah, 13, lucky number. But I know we work hard to chomp through them. And again, they seem to be quite well placed throughout the year as well. Normally, if you remember, when they were back end loaded or front end loaded, I think this year we've probably got the right balance. So yeah, great plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you, and I can see equal nods of support to the plan now, and I'm sure we all welcome the range of topics being covered in the plan for this financial year. So thank you, Stephen, for the clarity of the plan and your presentation. Can I check now whether colleagues are happy to approve the internal audit plan for 24-25? Thank you. I think that's approved then. Dear Stephen, thank you for joining us, and we will see you later, no doubt.
Thank you.
We're doing quite well on time, so we will move on to agenda item 4.4 then, which is the audit action log. And it's my pleasure now to invite Laura Tolley, the Head of Corporate Governance at DHCW, to update the committee on the status of the audit action log. Laura, croeso.
Thank you. Diolch, Marion. Yep, so this is the routine audit action log report, and just as a reminder, the committee will be aware that following advice from internal audit, one action dependent on a third party is being managed via a separate log for tracking. So there were 32 actions reviewed at the last committee meeting, and there were 19 then closed, which left a total of 13 open actions. We received a further 4 reports at the last meeting, which contains a total of 26 new actions. So all of these actions have been added to the log, which now contains a total of 39 open actions. 14 of these will be reviewed in private, just due to their sensitive and technical content. So out of these actions, 15 are considered as complete and 20 are on target for their completion by their target date. Committee members will note in the report that there are 4 actions that are marked as overdue, where we're asking the committee for a formal extension to the completion date. One of these will be requested in the private session. The other 3 are relating to actions from the benefits realisation audit. The action references and requested extension dates are included in section 4.5 of the report. I know work has been done on some of these actions. Is sort of a bit of a timing issue when the papers are due. So I just want to see if Sian or Claire just want to comment on these particular ones in the first instance. Thanks.
Yes. Yeah, so I hold my hands up. It's my first read audit action, so unfortunately, they relate to the benefits realisation action points. One of them relates to the framework. The framework has now been fully drafted, but we're asking for an extension just to finalise it. The other two, one of them relates to the benefits being built into the business cases. And the reason why it's taking longer, we are actually working with Welsh Government as part of their capital revamp to build those benefits into their process. So we need a bit more time to align our thinking with theirs and then build that into the capital process and take it through the finance capital group to agree those measures. And then the final one relates to the benefits SharePoint site. So we did attempt to put it onto the SharePoint site. Unfortunately, due to the size and nature of the files, it didn't really work. So we've had to rethink the technology solution for that, which we have. But again, that's going to take us a bit longer, and we're looking to extend that till the end of July. So I would say, in its purest sense, we've probably taken the actions and extended them a bit further, the boundaries a bit further to incorporate Welsh Government, but equally we've had to hit a technical problem with the benefits SharePoint site that we've had to reevaluate, so they're going to take a little bit longer, unfortunately.
Thank you, and that's helpful background and context. Laura, do you have anything further to add before I put the request to the committee?
No, that was it for this one. Thank you, Marion.
Thank you, Laura, for a very clear presentation. So we are being asked to note the audit action log and specifically to approve the request for audit action extensions, which are outlined in section 4.5 of the report. Are we happy to do that, colleagues? I think we are, so that's approved then. And thank you again, Claire, for the clarity of your explanation as well, which is very helpful. Diolch yn fawr. So we'll move on to the next agenda item, which is the local counter fraud update report, agenda item 4.5. And I'll now invite Gareth Lavington to present these three reports. Gareth, bore da a chroeso.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning. Good morning, everybody. I think the first report is the Q4 progress report, so I'll be very brief with this. It relates to the counter fraud work carried out on behalf of the organisation from January the 1st through till the end of the quarter, 31st of March. We've carried on with our corporate induction events, or attendance at them rather, and we've done another 3 of those, so that's quite assuring that we are continuing with our awareness and education sessions. Unfortunately, I still haven't been provided with the e-learning figures, but my understanding is they're now mandated. By the look on Claire's face, she might have them anyway, but maybe we'll come to that now in a second when I get to the end of this. In relation to prevention, we've had 2 bulletins this quarter, which have been issued by the Counter Fraud Authority. They've both been dealt with, and there were no issues for DHCW, I'm pleased to report. In relation to fraud risk, we're currently working on sort of an end of year and first quarter of next year sort of appraisal of our fraud risk profile. So I'm going to bring that to the Q2 meeting, which will be under the cover of a separate cover, if you like, which will be quite a comprehensive report as to where we are with regards to that. National Fraud Initiative is now complete. There's been no issues identified, and there weren't a particularly large amount of investigations to carry on there. We've had 1 referral, which was not progressed to formal investigation. It was in relation to a third-party cyber hacking of a rehabilitation organisation that provides services to NHS Wales, but they don't provide them to DHCW, so there wasn't an issue there. And the only other thing to mention really is significant salary overpayments and the introduction of a new salary overpayments dashboard. It's been in existence for a few months now, probably 6 months. And it just gives us a better, or gives Shared Services Partnership a better method of reporting significant salary overpayments through to the counter fraud team as per the All Wales policy. And I'm pleased to say that we haven't had any in DHCW. And that's the end of the report. And I can see Claire's waiting to say something about the e-learning figures, I'm sure.
Yeah, the score's on the door. So Yeah, so I'm really pleased with the progress we've made in DHEW in rolling out the counter fraud e-learning, and thank you to Gareth and the team for supporting that. As at the end of March, we had 981 employees that completed it, and our completion rate was at 79%. So I did set the challenge of 100, but I'm really delighted we've got to that level. And just to ensure the committee, it's now part of our mandatory training KPI sheet that we review in our monthly management board. So it does get the spotlight that it duly requires. So I'm really keen to get us to 100%. And I also am keen to thank Gareth for the work that he's done, certainly with the staff inductions, raising awareness throughout the year to our new recruits, which is really helping to raise the profile of it. And and also as a consequence of some of the training, we are the interest levels being raised, which I think goes to show of the great work that you're doing. So we're nearly there. We're not where we need to be. We need to be at 100, but we'll get there hopefully within the next quarter. And great work this year, working alongside Gareth and his team. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. It's really pleasing to hear that, and I'm sure it reflects the feelings of committee members as well. It's been a tremendous amount of work going on. And on a personal level, I should just like to add how much I enjoyed and how much I valued the counter-fraud awareness e-learning package. I thought it was an excellent piece of training, and I think it does help strengthen awareness and changes the mode of thinking around this particular area. So I just want to put that on record, and I'm sure colleagues around the table have found the same. So I've got a number of hands up. We'll start with Ruth then, and then Marilyn, if I may. Deal.
Thank you. I'd just like to say I am also up to date with my e-learning. Thank you very much. Didn't want Claire coming round my house and forcing me to do it. I'm really pleased that on the salary overpayments that we haven't had any, because I know we did talk about this at the last committee meeting. I think it is an area of risk for us with the programmes that we're taking on. So I am pleased to see that in answer to one of the questions that we asked last time, we got assurance around the process for making sure that we're not paying people twice, and it's pleasing to see that we haven't had any of those overpayments this time. So I'd just like to say thank you to the teams for ensuring we've got a focus on that.
Diolch, Ruth. Marilyn. I think you're still on mute, Marilyn.
Sorry, thank you, Chair. It's just picking up on the two comments made. I do know some colleagues who work in other health boards, and it is quite an issue for some health boards. So I feel sort of assured that it's not something that's affecting us at the moment. And I also then wanted to comment on the training. As somebody who delivers training, I felt that the temperature check was really bang on, it was spot on really, because it appealed to, I felt, people at strategic level as well as people at operational level, and I think it covered things that people might not necessarily think were fraud as well. So I felt that it was a very good piece of training, and as I said, I like yourself did actually enjoy it, and I'm not somebody who really enjoys e-learning, but it's always, but it was something that enthused me, and diolch yn fawr, thank you.
Diolch, Marilyn. I've got Alistair, then I'll come back to Gareth to you at the end. And Alistair.
Thanks, Chair. And Gareth, thanks for the report. I just wondered, do we have any information from previous year to be able to see if we're making progress, or to have some comparative information, which can always be helpful?
Funnily enough, Alistair, the annual report is next, I think, and there is an appendix to the report which does provide benchmarking data in relation to a number of areas, although it is fairly early on. We only introduced it last year, and we are sort of changing and open to ideas of what areas you would like in there. But there is that appendix which I will come to in the next report, if you like, which gives an indication of what I think is an indication of where we're sort of moving.
Thank you for that clarification, Gareth. So we are pleased to note the counter fraud progress update, and I think you've had a nice cue into your next report, which is the annual report for 23-24. Diolch.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. This is the annual report, so we're required to produce this, obviously, in relation to the overall compliance of the work we've carried out essentially over the year against the NHS Counter Fraud Authority requirements. You'll see, I don't intend to go through every bit of it, but you'll see that part 2 is a summary of compliance. And these are the listed requirements of the Counter Fraud Authority, and they feed into the annual plan, which is coming next as well. I'm pleased to say, in all the areas that we have control over, I've assessed this as green. It is a self-assessment, so it is down to me to assess it. This does go to Claire, obviously, for her review also. And then it is open to the compliance team from the Counter Fraud Authority, so it doesn't go unchecked, if you like. But I'm pleased that we are performing in the areas we need to perform. The only one area which I've reported as amber is the policy and response plan, and that's due to the fact that I think I've reported previously, or at least I've spoken to Sean about it, or Sean has chased me about it rather, that the current policy is out of date. I don't really have control over that at the moment, because the policy the organisation uses is the Shared Services All Wales Counter Fraud policy. So I'm open to further discussion if the organisation wants to adopt a local policy. That isn't a problem, but at this time I have chased the LCFS over there, but I'm not quite sure that I can give a date of when that's going to be updated. However, we rely on the old policy and things wouldn't change in there too much anyway. Apart from the ratings of compliance, it also gives a breakdown of the costs, etc., the days provision, and you'll see from the days provision, the way we've worked it out is that the organisation's had 83 days this year. I think that builds last year from, I think it was 99 last year, but we had that quite sort of protracted investigation last year. So I have spoken to Claire. Coming next is the annual plan. We did have a meeting, Claire and I, about sort of maybe upping the provision. There's not been agreed upon yet, but I've put a provisional number in there as an 85-day thing for the future. And yeah, essentially, I give a breakdown of the things that we've achieved through the year. So we've had 22 awareness sessions, which I'm really pleased about, and 333 members of staff being presented to. Like I say, the fraud risk profile will be brought to the next meeting, but we've covered those areas of fraud risk and those areas of local proactive exercise in response to fraud prevention notices and IBURNs. And the only other thing to add is going back to Alistair's question about the year-on-year figures. The appendix that has been added provides a number of areas, so planned days versus actual days. So you'll see that we planned for 40 days, we gave DHCW 40. Attendance at awareness sessions, the line is going in the right direction. I would say it's going up, so that's good. Referrals and investigations, I've given two there because I gave the one for all of the organisations that we cover, just to give an indication of the totality of the work that the team has to do for all the organisations. And then obviously the next sheet is the referrals that we get for DHCW. And on both of those are, especially the total referrals, it's quite a steep sort of rise there. And I like to think that that's probably because of the awareness that we're putting out there, so people are coming to us. And then finally, just the thematic areas of investigation, which is probably not as pertinent to DHCW as it is to, say, Cardiff and Vale, because the smaller number of referrals and investigations, if you like. So hopefully that all makes sense, and I'm open to any questions.
It does indeed, Gareth, and thank you for the clarity of that report. There's an awful lot going on, and it's heartening to see that documented in the annual report. I can see that Alistair has his hand up. Alistair.
Thanks, Chair. And Gareth, we're pleased to award you with the most colourful pie charts of the day award. Brilliantly done. No, very clear. It was actually with the performance charts in mind that I was asking the earlier question, and I fully appreciate that actually simple comparisons against previous years when we haven't built up necessarily the evidence of previous years can probably be more misleading than offer anything useful. So this is a matter of development and over time. But particularly on sanctions and costs, I'm thinking those would be good areas, I think, to see some relative comparative information as we move forward, Gareth. And you know, I would ask if that could be please considered as we move forward. They're the kind of hard edge of outcomes, which would be more related, in my view, to performance rather than, if you like, the softer edge, which is about uptake of an attendance. And they're very important, but it's the outcomes, I think, that would be of greatest interest to you know, residents of Wales and so on out there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for making that point, Alistair, which I think is a very valid one also. Unless there are any other comments, then we receive the annual report for 23-24 for assurance. And then finally, the last report in your suite of papers is the Local Counter Fraud Draft Work Plan for 24-25, and this is before us today for approval. Can I just ask you to introduce this briefly, please, Gareth?
Yes, yeah, I won't cover it all. It's 23 pages. It's very similar to the previous reports. It's changed slightly, but not too much. One of the changes is obviously, as I alluded to earlier, the days provision going up, but obviously that requires further discussion between myself and Claire. Essentially, the plan is a flexible plan. It's intended to be flexible so that we can react to the things that take place in the year. But essentially, it's a plan of how we intend to comply with the CFA requirements, as mentioned earlier. And it's all listed there, and I'll simply leave it at that and take any questions.
Thank you, Gareth. Sensible approach. Claire, would you like to respond to Gareth's challenge there?
No, we've sat down and really had time to reflect, because we're now 3 years in and we couldn't believe it's been 3 years actually. And actually we adopted the model that we'd done previously through Vrlindra, and we thought this is the year that we need to really reflect and think about the achievements, but also what are we going to achieve. So going back to Alistair's point about where's the track record, I think where's the target? You know, what are we going to do and how are we going to work more closely and develop together with developing Gareth's team, is to bring that sort of expertise and develop that expertise collectively. So we haven't actually, we had a long discussion and we went through the plan, which is great. But I think we'd like to hold our hands a bit tighter on this one and actually think about what is our longer term strategy in terms of counter fraud within digital, within DHEW, and how we can collectively put particularly perhaps a bit more resource into that area to take the lead on it from a digital point from NHS Wales. So so we'll obviously keep the board informed as we go through this year's plan, but I think this is the year now that we actually take the lead and define what counter fraud in digital will look like. So together with Gareth, we're going to start considering what that could be, and that may or may not need a little bit more resource potentially to do that. But again, if that's the case, I'll bring it back to board so you have full visibility of that point.
Thank you very much, Claire. It's good to hear about the level of ambition then, and setting a target and devoting a little time to pause and reflect perhaps on where we need to get to. So we are being asked to approve the draft work plan, and with that caveat then, further discussion to go ahead. Are we happy to approve the plan? And it's clear that we are. Gareth, can I take this opportunity as well, looking back on the year that's just gone, to thank you and the team. I think we've got a team here and a service that's maturing gradually, and it's proving to be extremely valuable for DHCW. So thank you and the team for all your hard work over the past year, and it's great to see the impact of that work showing through in terms of staff awareness as well, in terms of outputs, and I'm sure it will lead ultimately to clarity around the impact of the work going forward. Diolch yn fawr. And that brings us nicely then to the end of this part of the agenda. It is 11:15. We're bang on time. We've scheduled a 15-minute break this morning, so we'll return and resume the agenda at 11 o'clock. See you shortly. Diolch yn fawr. So it's welcome back to the part 5 of today's Audit and Assurance Committee meeting. This section, as usual, reports on our governance activity. And we'll open this part with agenda item 5.1, which is the finance update. I'll invite Claire Osmondson-Little, our Director of Finance, who's joined by the Head of Financial Services and Reporting, Sian Williams, to provide this month's finance update. Diolch, Claire.
Diolch, Marianne. So we've got 3 items to talk about. So I suggest I pass over to Sian, who will give us an update on the high-level purchase orders and also pick up the GP IT leasing. So I think if we stop after the high-value purchase orders, Sian, and then we'll take it from there. Thank you, Sian. Diolch. Okay, morning committee. So the high-value orders paper. There are no single high-value orders of more than 0.75 million in the period 13th of January to the 31st of March 2024. Details of all the single orders are given in Appendix A in full for the year. I just wish to highlight to the committee that there were 2 amendments to single orders for GP Systems contract and the managed print. They were revised down on the 28th of March, which meant there's a small reduction of 0.07770, and it's detailed by ref A14 and A15, but these 2 orders still remain over 750,000. There were 2 new suppliers where their cumulative orders reached over 0.75 million in the period of the report. These are shown in Appendix A and in Table 2, and this is NHS and an agency contractor. The full year position for all suppliers was spend over 0.75 million for the period 1st of April 2023 to 31st of March 2024 is given in Table 3 and within Appendix C, and it totals 84.7 million for the financial year. That is the end of the report.
Diolch. Thank you, Sian. That was very clear. Any questions for Sian? No. Okay. Thank you. We note that and hand back over to Claire then, if I may.
Yep. So, Sian, if you want to go through the GP leasing. I hope you've all had a coffee because this one is quite detailed, but yeah, Sian, thank you. Okay, so now I'm going to present the GP IT leasing paper 5.13. So this notes the progress made in agreeing the accounting treatment of GP lease PCs by DHCW. So DHCW procures IT equipment for GPs, which are installed in GP surgeries and recharged to health boards. In August 2023, DHCW established the commercial arrangement which allowed DHCW to lease PCs from Dell over a 5-year period rather than the current outright purchase arrangement. The lease would be material to DHCW, it would be over £1 million. Due to the implementation of IFRS 16, which we've talked about within the committee many times before, in 2023, and the arrangement with the health boards, the consequence of the lease required an in-depth consideration for the technical treatment. DHCW undertook a thorough assessment of the accounting impact, and by working with key stakeholders, including technical accounting forums, health boards, Welsh Government and Audit Wales, allowed DHCW to provide a view that could be adopted across Wales. The finding of the works were presented to Audit Wales and Welsh Government on February the 28th, 2024, and Audit Wales confirmed they're happy with the approach this March, 25th of March 2024. So the next steps are to update the technical accounting group of the paper that we have done, and also now the primary
primary mental care team can invoke the lease arrangement. I just want to note to Audit Committee, we haven't started the lease in the financial year 2023 to 2024. So there is the technical backing to the findings within the paper, which I wasn't going to go into in Audit Committee, but we found a technical solution that all parties were happy with.
Thank you, Sian, for that update. And I think it's pleasing to note that we have the support from Audit Wales on the current position and the steps that are being taken. I have a question from Ruth Glazert, a question or maybe a comment.
It was just a comment of thanks. I read that paper 10 times and I didn't really understand what was going on. But I think Sian's very clear explanation and confirmation that we found a technical solution that everybody was happy with provided me the assurance that I needed that we'd done what was required, whatever that was. Deal.
Thank you, Ruth.
Thank you. I can't see any other hands up, so I think we're all satisfied with the clarity of your explanation, providing a bit more context on the paper. Would you like to make any further comments, Sian, before I hand over to Claire?
Just to clarify, the technical solution was that the leases would remain transacted through revenue as they currently are, whereas IFRS 16 it may go through capital. So that was the technical recommendation.
Thank you for that. So we are being asked to note the report on GPIT leasing. Diolch yn fawr. So there's one final report, a verbal update under the finance section, and that's on the DPIF allocation for 24-25.
Yes.
And Claire, this is you.
Diolch, Marion. I thought it was important to brief the Audit Committee of where we are in terms of our funding allocations. So just to recap, I'm going to just talk about our allocations, then I'll talk about the DPIF allocation and then what the next steps are. And we're currently working with Welsh Government, which is why actually we met with them yesterday and we're meeting again with them on Friday to validate. So it is still moving sand in this area. So in terms of our funding allocation for next year, our core fund, we have, as you know, we have quite a number of funding streams. Our core funding, which equates to last year 121 million, has increased to 130 million. It's an 8.8 million increase. And that's made up of the Welsh Government core, which, as I noted before, they had been consistent with the treatment with health boards and given us a 3.67% increase, which equated to about 1.9 million. We had a primary care uplift of 2.3 million, and that really reflected not only the inflationary aspects, but also the fact that we are going to consolidate under EMIS in terms of our GP practices, and there is a rollout plan assumed in that funding. Depreciation stayed the same. The SLA increases, which were all agreed and signed off by all health boards and trusts, increased by 1.9 million, and that was predominantly a reflection of increase in licensing costs that we've passed through to health boards. And finally, we had the All Wales licensing costs, which have increased from 26.9 million to 30 million, so a 3.2 million pound increase. So in our core, there's a lot of factors in that, not just the general uplift, but our uplift was increased. COVID funding has remained the same at 7.4 million. That's despite us rolling down the track and trace, but increasing our vaccine and growing that vaccine. And this month, actually, we participated in the measles support for Welsh Government as a result of that. But our Welsh Government DPIF funding this year has fallen, and it's the only funding stream to fall. So it's fallen from 32.4 million to 28.1 million. And why has it fallen? So there's a couple of factors. We actually put in a plan that related to 36.4 million. We then worked collectively with Welsh Government to reduce that to 33.3 million. But it wasn't until late in March that they indicated that our allocation or our control total would be 28.3 million. So during the back end of March and continuing as we speak, we are working with Welsh Government to understand that allocation in a bit more granularity and also manage the communication around that to the relevant programmes to ensure them to plan and actually deliver what they need to deliver in the Q1 and keep the wheels on the bus. So that control total was a result of work that we did very quickly at the end of March to allocate the quality impact assessments related to the programmes affected by that reduction. And we are still working with them to fine-tune that analysis. So the long and short of it is the DPIF funded allocations are reduced in the forthcoming year by 4.3 million compared to last year. It is concentrated within the big programmes where there is ability to absorb that and reprofile those sorts of reductions. However, we're working alongside the programmes to understand what that will mean in terms of deliverables and helping Welsh Government in the way that they articulate that impact to the Minister in terms of what will now not be delivered in the forthcoming year as a result of those reductions. So, like I said, we're still working with them, but we have had assurance around the 28 million. So from a financial perspective, it's really now understanding how we prioritise those fundings in the appropriate way alongside the programmes to deliver what we need to deliver in this financial year. So I thought it was important for the committee to be aware of what we're doing in that space, but also to note that in the core and other areas of funding, that is now agreed and we're on with delivering our plans as you would expect. So I'm happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thank you, Claire. That's really very helpful. And obviously discussions are ongoing as we speak. The one thing before I open it out to questions, you mentioned a reduction of 4.3 million, but in fact it goes up to 8.3 when you consider our bid for funding, which stood at the 36 million. So in terms of, it is arguably an 8 million gap from where we hope to be. So what's going to drop off from that aspiration of 36 million?
So within that, there are a number of large strategic programmes, of which that would include things such as the National Data Resource, medicines management and others, but predominantly the bigger programmes. Those are the areas where we're looking to see what we can reprofile or curtail. And because we haven't finalised where that sits, and we are still working on that to effect. So yeah, it will be amongst the big programmes. What we have secured, though, is the cancer programme, which was a priority for DHEW for the forthcoming year. And again, with the balance, it's working out how best to allocate those funds appropriately.
Diolch, Claire. I got a hand up from Alistair. Diolch.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Claire. I just it's a couple of things really. One is more an observation than a question. But it would seem like the DPIF information or confirmation coming through was very much in the category of surprises, and we all love surprises at the right time and in the right way. But the very last thing that any of us require in terms of development or budget is surprises. So it's just really to register the concern that not only is this a significant funding gap for an organisation that has, just in this agenda previously, we've acknowledged the difficulty of taking on contracts without the necessarily due diligence in advance that was possible. So we take on more than we're resourced for very often, with the quantity of that being unknown, and suddenly we find ourselves with a significant gap that is not part of the discussion and thinking and joint working. And it's really just to register that seems to me to be almost a bigger problem than just the money, what's driven that. So I just wanted to flag up my concern around that, and that how incredibly important it is that we do this budget development work in a joined up way, and that takes a number of partners to I don't know if you can have more than 2 to tango. I'm not very good at the tango, but I think you're limited to 2. But we just need to make sure that we are doing everything we can to get back to a position where we all know what we're doing, the left hand and the right hand, in a coordinated way. My question, Claire, is this, and it relates partly to the duty of quality that paper that sits in front of us as well. We can all count on in the time-memorial fashion death and taxes, but it seems like we can also always count on costs rising, and that doesn't necessarily follow that latter part. And I just wondered if you could give, in terms of duty of quality, there must be a connection with continuous improvement links within the organization that would look at efficiency, cost savings, ways of making ourselves more efficient. I wonder if you could just say a word or two about what we are doing to directly review, challenge, explore other ways of going about some of the rising costs, some of the existing cost bases, to see if there is efficiency that we could push at if we work at it, rather than, and forgive me, I'm not suggesting for a second that we're passive about this, but it would be helpful just to understand what we're active in that area. Thanks, Claire.
Yeah, no, Alistair, there's quite a number of points there, really, isn't it? First of all, were you surprised? Frustrated, probably, is probably the best term, because we'd spent quite a lot of time positioning our requirements for each of the funding streams. And as you can see, we agreed our position with the others, but for the one that is our core, our expectations were not aligned in terms of the funding requirement. So how do we work on getting that better? We are working more closely with the Welsh Government and the directors of digital in understanding how priorities are set and where we sit within that, and trying to get the fine balance. So that's the first thing. I think it's having greater transparency in our understanding of what our allocation is, and therefore being able to spend more time fine-tuning the requirement and that prioritisation setting. So that's the first thing. So what are we doing about it? So there's a couple of things here. One is Evan is working really hard with the programmes to really look at the efficiencies around how we deliver our programmes. And is there anything that we can do within that will enable us to sharpen the way, and by bringing all the programmes under DHEW, what opportunity does that present to really to stretch our fixed costs around the supporting of those programmes? So that's what we're doing in our programmes. We are also looking at and it was a criticism, if you remember, or an observation more than a criticism of Welsh Government, is our over-reliance on vacancy factor. So the other part of the work that we're doing is looking at what is our operating model going forward for DHEW, and how do we look at how we could restructure the way that we deliver our move to a product-based delivery, and therefore have a more effective and efficient product delivery, but at the same time reduce the need, reduce our costs. And the most important factor in that, if I'm honest with you, is the architecture. How do we reduce the clutter within our architecture and make it work for us in a more efficient and effective way? And part of that is moving to cloud, which may not save us money, right? And the second part of that is actually looking at how we build our systems. We have quite a complex architecture currently, which relies on licensing and integration and all these areas that add cost. And those costs are subject to inflation because inevitably they're a third party. So how do we make that structure work for us in a more efficient way? So together with the directors, we are looking at building an operating model that we can afford, or that we need to deliver safely our products and care. The problem with that is that that's going to take us a bit of time to do. And it's really a balancing that need for change and the ability to deliver that change around the funding requirement. And also in that equation, I would say that's what we're doing. There is also another question here is the DPIF funding arrangements effective into funding digital development. Yeah, and like you said, with a tap that shuts and opens and shuts and changes in the flow, that doesn't lead to efficient and effective deployment of digital spend. So within that, I think there's also a challenge. And to be fair, Welsh Government are holding their hands up. They're saying this is the last year of DPIF. So what is the longer term digital funding of programmes, and how does that fit with the requirements that we need? So sorry, I've probably overlabored the point, but it's quite a complex funding needs. But we are spending, and I have spent a lot of time trying to break that down into 5 key areas. One is to look at simplifying everything we do, which is about architecture, as well as about our toolkit and about our systems. It's looking at putting our people first, because they're the fuel in our tank. And we need to engage them in a way that they'll work with us to deliver the future operating model for DHCW. There's finding out value. So from a costing perspective, how do we structure the delivery of our systems in the most cost efficient way? Simplify everything we do. So simplify everything we do is about the toolkit. And there's one other, which I've forgotten, I'm afraid to say. But so we are building, we're calling it Build Our Future, which will bring all of these ingredients together to try and demonstrate to Welsh Government that this is the best way to deliver digital in Wales, and we're the best people to do it because there is no other better way to do it. So yeah, so that's what we're working on, really, to demonstrate what a sustainable funding model will look like ultimately.
Thank you, Claire, for that detailed response, and thank you for a very good question as well, Alistair, which I think prompted an exploration of all the challenges and the potential solutions for closing that funding gap and building a sustainable operating model for the future. Thank you for that. I think that was an interesting discussion. I can't see any other hands up. If there aren't, I propose then we note the finance update, noting in particular the significant funding gap and the work that's being done to deliver greater efficiency and in the medium to long term to build a more sustainable operating model. Thank you. I know it's been a very challenging time for Claire and the team. You know, year end is always that time of year, and we're very grateful to you and your team for those updates and your support. Diolch yn fawr. Alistair, is that a new hand up?
It is, just a real quick one. Is the 5th one, Claire, learning from the past?
That's it. Yes.
The one.
Thank you.
So you've indoctrinated as well.
It's the 5 strategic principles. I've tried to align them to that so that we can really ingrain them actually into what we do.
And certainly worth noting that 5th, which, as you say, is learning from the past. And thank you for that reminder. Marilyn.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, what Marion's already said, and thanks for all the hard work, Claire, and your team, but also to say I think it's really good that we're being proactive, because there is that gap in the DPIP funding, us going and saying, actually, we've identified this and this is what we'd like it to look like. I think it's much better for us to be proactive rather than being on the end of a new financial arrangement that really doesn't suit us. So I think that it's a good place to be in, and I'm really sort of heartened really that we're taking that stance. And thank you for all the hard work that you put into, you know, looking at what that project approach is going to look like in the future. And again, it's working in progress, isn't it? Things will change and we'll flex and respond to that as a result of that. So yeah, Jack and Val, just want to add that comment.
Diolch, Marilyn. Thank you for those observations. I'm going to close this discussion now then and move us on to agenda item 5.2, which is the Quality and Regulatory Compliance and Cyber Resilience Unit Report. And it's my pleasure now to invite Paul Evans to present the update report, which includes the Q3 Duty of Quality Always On report, which follows the Health and Social Care Quality and Engagement Wales Act, which, as you recall, came into force a year ago. Croeso, Paul, bore da.
Diolch, Marian. Just to note that the Cyber Resilience Unit is not included anymore. As I reported last month, they've now moved to the Operations Directorate, so they're not part of this report.
Of course. Thanks for that clarity, Paul. Diolch.
So as always, I've arranged my my report into themes. So I'll start off with audit. So during Q4, we had 3 successful external audits across ISO 9001, 14001, and British Standard 10008. There were no non-compliances raised across that whole suite of audit. There were 5 opportunities for improvement, and these have all been logged on iPassport and been addressed by the relevant teams. We only have 1 audit planned in Q1, which is a surveillance visit for ISO 27001. And the risk-based internal audit program ended the year at 96% compliant with the audit plan. We slipped on 1 audit due to the resource requirements needed to manage the external audits, but that audit will be picked up as an extra audit during Q1. On the quality management system, the team have continued to work with document owners around the percentage of IMS documents within due date for review. We have seen improvements since the last report, and we have the document management strategy fully approved by execs and management board. We expect to see some quite rapid improvements as we implement that strategy. And in fact, we're already seeing evidence from some teams who are really embracing the move to iPassport and have now pushed a number of their documents that were overdue through the publishing process. We continue to manage all our audits and non-compliances through iPassport, and again, there's been some really good engagement with teams across the organisation, and we are starting to see now some really good improvements in compliance figures. And as an example there, on the management board report for this week, our non-compliances shows only 60% within review. Looking at the figures hot off the press this morning, we're now at 85%, so we're starting to see some real traction there. Moving on to legislation, just 2 areas to pick up. So firstly, medical device regulations. We've seen yet another delay from the MHRA on the implementation of the new UK regulations. They've published what I would describe as a very vague roadmap around their intentions for the new legislation, which suggests we may see something by the end of this calendar year. We may not. So the team's focus now is switched on ensuring that we comply with the current UK medical device regulations, with one eye on the European regulations, which we believe will be very closely aligned to our new legislation. Excuse me. We're also progressing very well towards certification for ISO 13485, which is the quality management standard specific to medical devices. And we're currently running a series of internal audits against that standard with a hope to be looking for certification in Q3. Duty of quality, as you mentioned, Marian, we're now into the 2nd year of the Health and Social Care Quality and Engagement Act. And the focus now has shifted very much on to engagement with directed SLTs to run a series of workshops, and Claire's finance team were the first ones to undergo a workshop to really sort of bottom out what the new quality standards mean to the business processes for each team in the organisation, so we can start to really build the detail in our reports. The second always on report is attached to this report for the committee to note. This builds on the first always on report that we produced, and the Q4 report and the annual report are currently being drafted, and there is significantly more detail in those reports than in the Q3 report, which is in line with what government expectations on an iterative improvement on that reporting. And just to note, we are to date still the only organisation in NHS Wales has produced an always on report. As part of our annual report scoping, one of my team has reviewed websites across the whole of NHS Wales, and there's no evidence of any reports anywhere else. We're also close to completing work on a quality framework which is aligned to a product-based way of thinking, and also with Joanne's quality trilogy, so it'll further support the work we're doing on our duty of quality reporting. Just one extra that I just wanted to mention, the quality team did successfully complete all its INTP milestones in 23-24, and we have a number published in the INTP for this coming year that we're looking forward to tackling. And just as we move into Q1, the key activities the team will be focusing on are the workshops I mentioned around duty of quality and the development and publication of the first annual quality report. We're looking to roll out the quality improvement training that we've been developing to support the quality improvement aspects of the duty of quality, and also finalise an updated quality impact assessment toolkit, which I'll be reviewing and signing off and sending to Claire for review this week. We would be implementing the document management strategy across 2 phases, which are outlined in the strategy. But also in this quarter, we'll be implementing the new WIAG Power App for our assurance processes, and finally critically evaluating our risk-based internal audit programme to capture some improvements that we've identified, including the use of AI to conduct the cross-clause analysis that's required as part of that programme. And that's it for me, so I'm happy to take any questions.
Diolch, Paul, and thank you for highlighting some of those key areas of activity over Q3. And obviously we look forward to getting that final report for Q4 and the annual report going forward. I can see Alistair's hand up, so I'll start with you, Alistair, if I may. Diolch.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Paul. An interesting report. It's a question on 4.9. I'd only just genned up on Duran's quality trilogy when I found it's a quadrilogy. So with some trepidation, what is the 4th dimension? So
the quadrilogy, Arthur, is really come from Welsh Government's statutory guidance around the duty of quality. Duran didn't write the quadrilogy. His trilogy is quality control, quality planning, quality improvement. Some people, Welsh Government included, have opted to use quality assurance, which is an overarching principle, as a 4th leg of a quadrilogy. But if you Google a quadrilogy for Duran, you probably won't find very much.
Thank you. Does that answer your question, Alistair? Great, thank you. Claire, I wondered whether there was anything you wanted to add before we draw this agenda item to a close?
That was a cracking question. Well done, and well done, Paul, for being on the ball. We are genuinely trying to get people to think about quality as part of their day-to-day. And the key work that Paul is instigating with the team is to get them to think about quality in the work that they're doing and look at it through their SOPs. And we don't know whether it's going to work or not, but it's a different approach to try and get people to look at the way they operate through the lens of the quality. So I'm really excited by this piece of work. Laura, who's leading it, is really passionate about it as well. So it'll be interesting to see if that helps us to embed quality, because that's the key thing for us. Is there's a lot of rules and regulations and SOPs and audits and all that sort of stuff, which is all preventative stuff and all important stuff. But actually, wouldn't it be great if we actually just did it as part of the way we think? So I think that would be an interesting work, and maybe later on in the year, Paul or Laura could come back and feedback on how that is going. But there's an awful lot of work in space. I'm delighted with the progress the team are making. I'm interested that the new NHS awards are back out, so I know they'll be keen to apply. But yeah, they're doing some great work, but the key to it is embedding quality in DHEW, and that they're really taking that to heart and trying to do that through an interactive workshop with the relevant directorate. So it'll be interesting to see how that will pan out. But yeah, some great work from the team. Well done.
Thank you, Claire. And we note the content of the update report, and I think we can take assurance from the fact that clearly we are taking quality seriously with a view to embedding it throughout all we do. I think it's particularly heartening to see the improved compliance and commitment to the internal and external audit programme, so that we are as an organisation becoming more aware of the regulatory requirements in the organisation. And as you say, if we get that right, it's all about embedding the quality across everything we do. So thank you again, Paul, for your detailed update. And I think the committee would like a further update later on in the year from both you and Laura, perhaps, just to hear how this work is progressing, because it's a very important strand of work which should underpin all that we do as DHCW. So thank you very much for that.
Diolch.
Diolch. We'll move on then now to agenda item 5.3, which is the Legislative Assurance Register. And I'm now going to turn to Laura to present this register, which is we're being asked to note for assurance purposes. Laura.
Diolch, Marion. Yep, really pleased to present this update on the Legislative Assurance Framework Register. And just to say, it's very much a collaborative piece of work between corporate governance and the quality and regulatory team. So just to thank Paul and members of the quality team for their ongoing support with this work. I'll just draw out some key highlights from the report, and happy to take any questions if there are, and probably direct them to Paul to answer any of the detail if that's okay. So the register can be found in full as a link within the reporting section 4.1. This is reviewed on a monthly basis by the IMS Assurance and Quality and Regulatory groups. Committee members are asked to note that the addition of 7 pieces of legislation deemed applicable to DHCW to the register. That's detailed in the table at 4.1 of the report, and there's been no request to remove any legislation from the register during the period. Just like to make committee members aware that DHCW will formally fall under the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act from the 30th of June 2024. So this will appear on the register during the next reporting period. And the wellbeing objectives, which are a formal requirement of the Act, were approved by the SHA board on the 28th of March 2024. So that's all I was going to draw out from the report today, if that's okay, Chair. We're just asking the committee to note the report for assurance, and happy to take any questions. Yeah.
Diolch, Laura, and I think important to highlight, it was referenced earlier in this meeting that from the 30th of June, as you say, we fall under the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act, which is an important milestone for this organisation, and worth referencing that and escalating that to board. But clearly we've discussed this at a previous board, and it is very much on our site. Ruth. You've got your hand up.
Yeah, Diolch, thank you. Thanks for that update, Laura. It's just a follow-up, really. So obviously Claire was talking about quality becoming part of what everybody does. Long time fans of this committee will know I'm not much one for registers, because it's just a list of stuff, and does it actually ever get used? I know we look at it through the committee, but what's the general awareness of this register like across the organisation? Is it actually something that people will use in their day-to-day roles, or get pointed to in their day-to-day roles, to make sure that across the organisation we're really thinking about all of that legislation in everything that we do?
Thank you for that question, Ruth. Claire, do you want to respond to it, or
Yes.
shall I turn to Laura and Paul? I'm in your hands.
So it's an interesting one, because I do think we do have it is a really comprehensive register, I have to say, and Laura's really due diligence in keeping it up. She's not afraid to poke us either. So as part of the directorate reviews in our our weekly execs, for example, we regularly have legislation on that agenda, and actually issues that relate to a particular legislation. We're not, admittedly, we're not very good at sometimes drawing those dots around, but we are aware of the implications for diversity or for disability, and all the various aspects of it. There's quite a lot in POD, in people in OD, but actually there is an awareness of it. Whether it's embedded all the way through the organisation, I think, like quality, it's a good challenge, Ruth. But again, that's about developing the processes around some of those, so you've got some key controls built into it. And again, I think the work with the workshops, Paul, actually adding this in as to, you know, where are the aspects of legislation and where are the key points in design and development that we need to be aware of, and just reminding ourselves wouldn't be a bad thing. But I think having a register in the first place enables us to do that cross-check, but bringing it to life is embedding it, and that is challenging. But there are controls within the organisation that poke us and to have a look at it and refer to it.
Thank you for responding to that question, Claire, and I think it's good to have that assurance. Paul, do you want to add anything on this particular point?
Yes, please, Marion. So, I mean, I understand your concern around registers, Ruth, and unfortunately, standing order say we have to have this one. But I totally agree. We could do more, and the duty quality workshops are, as Claire's mentioned, an ideal way to raise awareness. The whole organisation doesn't review them, but they are a standing agenda item at both IMS Assurance Group and Quality and Regulatory Group. So the individuals involved in those groups do review the register in full each month.
Thank you for that clarity, Paul. Julie, I suspect that you want to add something on this particular topic?
Yes, thanks, Chair. It was just to say, really, there's an awful lot of legislation relating to estates and health and safety, and it is pretty high on our agenda and does feature in other meetings as well. So just partially to address Ruth's query, yes, embedded is the word. Thank you.
Thank you. We can obviously take some assurance from that. I've got a final observation or question from Madeline.
Yes, it was just that Claire talked about doing the gaps and filling the gaps, and Paul, you said about doing more. I just wondered about bringing things alive, because I've had quality roles before in the past. How can we use the values that we've got in the organisation to attach it so that everybody can see the relevance? Because often, we have got legislation, we have got the register, and thank you, I commend you in doing that, because we've got a mechanism of measurement. But when we talk about individual members of staff, like Ruth's point, what does that mean to me? What's the difference between me doing a job in a certain way and me doing a job that really, really, looks at the quality aspect? And is there an opportunity to look at about the outcome base of it, about how much quality has an impact on what in the final product? And in the way we work when we talk about a behavioural sense, just something I'm throwing out there. That's all, really. It's about that, because I'm somebody who delivers training. It's always like, what does that mean to me? How am I going to know I'm really looking at quality? And just like equality, and Claire's talked about, and diversity and inclusion, it's everybody, it's all of ours, it's all our role to actually do our jobs the best we could do. And quality is that, isn't it? And I'm just wondering, is that are we getting that message over to everybody? That's all.
So building on what you've heard already then, Paul, would you like to respond to that final challenge?
Thanks, Marion. Yes, I mean, great points, Madeline. And if you look at our values and look at the quality standards that are part of the duty next to them, it's almost as if Welsh Government looked at our values when they wrote them. So that, whilst the duty quality workshops don't focus on our values, the fact that they are so closely aligned with the 12 quality standards means that we are sort of pulling out that sort of level of detail through the workshopping process, I think.
Okay, thank you.
Thank
you for that, Paul.
Yes, Madeline, and thank you, Paul. And one final comment from Claire, please.
Yeah, Madeline, you're right. And I'm just thinking, we've got diversity groups, we've got support groups. It's about how do we bring it to life and make that connection. I'm not sure actually how we do that most effectively, but I would welcome your view on that actually. In terms of how do we bring the legislation requirement through our values through some of these groups and to just act as a check. Have we done it? So yeah, I food for thought. I think I probably need to go away and think about that in a bit more detail. But yeah, really helpful perspective on it, actually.
And thank you, Claire, for responding so positively. I think it is something that probably requires some more thought, and perhaps you can prolong that discussion offline between now and the next committee meeting. But well-made comments and a well-made challenge, I think, and food for thought for all of us. So thank you again, Paul, for your report, and we are being asked to note for assurance the legislative assurance register, and thanks both to Laura and Paul for your work on this. We'll move on then, if I may, to agenda item 5.4, which is the Estates Decarbonisation and Compliance Report. And I'll now turn to Julie Ash to present the report, which we are being asked to note. Diolch yn fawr, Julie.
Diolch, Marianne. Okay, I'm very pleased to present this report, which has 4 attachments accessible via links in the papers. The first being the Decarbonisation Action Plan, which has been refreshed for the period 2024 to 27. And I'm pleased to confirm that that was submitted to Welsh Government on target with our IMTP at the end of March. The second is our Q4 DCR return, which is a standard template, which goes into a team in shared services. Just to note that that reporting frequency is changing and is now going to change to 6 monthly going forward. So the committee will see, rather than quarterly reports, 6 monthly reports going forward. The third is the NHS performance measures annual qualitative return for 23-24. So that's the narrative return required as part of the performance measures reporting, and that was submitted on time. And the fourth attachment is our compliance report. So if it's okay with the committee, I'll just pick up a few highlights from each area going forward. So just to mention, we've under estates, we've established now an estates development group, which is chaired by Chris, our board secretary. So that's going very well. So we have directorate representation on that from all areas. We've undertaken a staff survey, which I think I've referred to before. So we're working through outcomes from that. So that's very positive going forward. With regard to leases, we've been in negotiations for 2 lease renewals. This was relating to T Glanor Avon, and that would be effective from the 1st of April 2025, and Boken Park, and again, that was a retrospective agreement effective from the 1st of March 2024. So I'm pleased to report that we've completed the Boken Park lease now, and as part of the T Glanor Avon discussions, we've had some very positive discussions with the landlords who have agreed as part of those negotiations to improve accessibility in the building, something I think we're probably all aware is very much needed. We were also having some very good discussions with partner organisations with regard to shared space. So this all links into the rationalisation work going forward. So we're going to be joined in T Glanor Avon by colleagues from the NHS Confederation. They actually came on a visit a couple of weeks ago. We're also in discussions with Shared Services and WISC in North Wales. And just moving on to decarbonisation. So as I mentioned, we refreshed our plan, which was approved by board and submitted on time. That does include targets up to 2030. We are on line to achieve those targets, which match those in the Welsh Government Decarbonisation Action Plan. We're also continuing to engage with shared services with regard to the supply chain emissions. There's been some good work done in that area, which has seen us be able to measure our supply chain emissions far more accurately, which is, again, very positive. And just on environmental and compliance, Paul referred to successful ISO 14001 audit. So we've maintained our certification there, which is great news, and no non-compliances as reported. And our overall compliance of plant systems and equipment is 99%, so well ahead of our target of 90%. And internal planned preventative maintenance remains at 100%, which again is an excellent position, and it's reflecting a lot of focused work in that area. So very pleased to report that. And that was it from me. Very happy for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie, and thank you for so clearly highlighting some of the key areas of activity since we last met. Can I just check whether you have any further questions or observations for Julie? No, I think
perhaps one final one from me, Marion, just to mention that we have been participating in an audit of decarbonisation with internal audits. So the committee will see a report on that coming forward in a future meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much for adding that. It's a very clear report, and thank you for your work on it. So as a committee then, we are being asked to note the Estates and Decarbonisation Compliance Report, which includes the suite of documents that you've presented here today. Diolch yn fawr. Thank you. We move on then to the corporate risk report, and I'd now like to invite Chris Darling to present the update which we are being invited to discuss. Chris.
Yeah, Marion. Yeah, I'm just going to start with a verbal update on the Board Assurance Framework report process that we're just in the process of reviewing for 2024-25. This follows the approval by the board of the IMTP for 2024 to 2027 and the approval of DHCW's long-term strategy. Important within the context of having approved our strategic missions, objectives, and our long-term strategy principles. So the review will include an assessment of the controls and assurances that have been put in place over the last financial year, so 2023-24, a backward look, the mitigations of the principal risk scores, and an assessment going into 2024-25. The board will take part in a board development session that's planned for the 25th of April to review our risk appetite and our board assurance approach. And I'll just thank Ruth in advance because she's kindly offered to give some constructive challenge and feedback, as she's done in the last couple of years when we've looked at our annual risk appetite position. So that's scheduled in the next couple of weeks, just to make the committee aware of that. In terms of the risk position for the audit committee, there are two risks assigned to this committee for oversight and scrutiny. So that's DHCW 0313, the digital cost pressure service model changes risk. And the second one is DHCW 0331, the fixed term funding resource funding risk. Section 4.3 of the report just shows the target risk score we're trying to bring those two risks down to. The first risk around digital cost pressure service model changes has reduced since its initial risk score, but there's a bit more work to do on that. The second one, we're trying to significantly reduce the risk of fixed term funding with permanent members of staff in post. And I'll just invite Sian in to comment on those two risks, if that's okay, Sian.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. So on the first risk, digital cost pressure, we've carried out a review to assess changes in our technological layer as part of the shift to cloud. The assessment will support projection of the final business case and also inform the skills and capabilities required. This will enable DHW to transition and sequence the transition of solutions in a value-based, efficient way. So as part of our supplier-based digital cost pressures mitigations, we have three main approaches. The first, early warning via robust contract management review, horizon scanning of future services trend developments. Second, funding adjustments to pass-through cost increases via the SLA. And the third, transition away from exposed arrangements via changes in architecture to move away from costly licensing models.
So we've identified as part of our IMTP process potential pressures of 2 million, and we're working collectively across Wales to minimise the final impact with suppliers, whilst also minimising exposure to DHCW via incorporating planning increases as part of our SLA discussions for this year. So that's the update on the first risk. Shall I move on to the second update?
Yes, I'll take, if there are questions, we'll take them at the end, Sian. Thank you.
Okay, so fixed term resource funding risks. So this is being managed through the organisation's strategic resourcing group. A baseline assessment of tenure, skills, capabilities is being carried out in order to assess opportunities to potentially support alternative priority activity in the future and manage any transition. It has been agreed a monthly update will be provided to the risk management group.
Diolch, Sian. Thank you for the clarity, and helpful to hear about those mitigating actions. Claire, I just wondered, as the risk owner, is there anything you wanted to add at all at this point? Obviously, we're having an extensive board development section in 2 weeks' time, so that will give us ample opportunity to discuss this in more detail.
Yeah, so we are looking at our long-term sustainability through that transformational programme. So yeah, and I think once we've got the roadmap developed, it'd be worth sharing that and bringing it back to audit committee. But we're just developing it at the moment. So yeah, we'll discuss that probably later in the year as part of the agenda.
Great, thank you, Claire. Diolch, thank you, Chris, and thank you to colleagues for that update. Unless there are any other questions or observations, and I can't see any, so thank you, Chris. We note the status of the work to update the board assurance framework for 24-25, and note the current status of the risk register in terms of the relevance to this committee. Diolch yn fawr. We'll move on then to the procurement and scheme of delegation compliance report, and I'll now turn to Julie Francis to present this report, which we're being asked to note. Hi, Julie.
Julie, I think you're on mute.
I am, Claire, thank you. I'm not now.
Great.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Yes, I've been reporting 5 SQAs or STAs to a value of 259,861.73. Those were undertaken in accordance with the standing financial instructions and were based on uniqueness and or bespokeness of requirements. Contract extensions to a value of 806,000, undertaken in accordance with the modification of contracts permitted under procurement regulations and standing financial instructions. And I have to report today non-conformance in relation to the standing orders and section 12 to 2 retrospective call-offs. These are under existing resource framework agreements, one to KNOS at 390,000 and one to TPX at 271,000. So in terms of dealing with that retrospective approach, which is clearly not acceptable, we are adopting a multifaceted approach and actually continuing to adopt that approach, with closer partnership working with lead directors across the organisation and their teams to fully understand their programmes of activity from both a procurement and contracting perspective. This will not only ensure compliance, but will also help to manage contractual and financial risks more effectively and manage resources in relation to procurement and contracting activity for both commercial services resources themselves and colleagues' input into those requirements and contract management across the organisation and more widely. We've also identified key resources for further training and education. Some of those have already taken place recently, which have been very successful. And dates for the remaining directorates are now in diaries to take this forward too. Another element that we're focusing to try and address this issue is via our resource commodity leads within my team. They're meeting with the resource contract owners to forward plan their requirements and also to measure any benefits coming out of the resource arrangements that have already been put in place against intended deliverables and against the business plan. Finally, the issue has been raised in contract reviews with suppliers and going forwards will be included as a standard agenda item.
Thank you, Julie. Thank you very much for that. You've drawn attention to some of those key issues. Can I just highlight the non-compliance with the SFIs? Obviously, this follows on non-compliance from our last meeting as well, which has been highlighted to board. And I guess you've drawn attention to some of the steps that are being taken to increase training, development, awareness around procurement regulations. But I guess it is disappointing to hear that we are once again non-compliant with the SFIs. Are we confident that there is necessary resource being devoted to training and awareness so that this is being rolled out at sufficient pace, I guess is my concern and question. Claire.
So there is so we've investigated both of these non-compliances, and you're right, this is the third strike now in terms of the number. So as a result, we are going to do a couple of things. One is we're working closely with each of the directorates to come up with a procurement plan. So although it was a breakdown in assumptions around where that particular work package is. So they actually had written the work package and submitted it, but it hadn't gone through all the stages that it needs to do. So some of that was an education to understand the process and where they are with the process. To give a bit of more control around where they are, what we're developing is, and Julie's done a great job, is set up and she shows it actually, is the monitor showing the strategic procurements. But what we want to do is take that to another level and to understand where are they in those procurements, because those strategic procurements tend to be the high value ones. What we need to capture is the work packages and to elaborate where are they in the process and what needs to be done to get them to the end, so that there is clarity on what is being procured, where is it with the process and who's it with in order to action and get some of the work done. So and equally, we have recruited into the commercial team, so not all of them are on board yet, which will also help enable some of that to happen in a far more effective manner and a speedier manner going forward, we would hope. So those are the key things. It is unfortunate it was in the same area, so we have identified where that is and we are coaching the individuals to get a greater understanding. And as Julie has already elaborated, we are also reminding our suppliers that they should not undertake any work without a requisition having been done. So we've tackled it at both ends, and I think there was an acknowledgement there that they've got a role to play in ensuring that they have followed the rules appropriately. I would also like to say the work was completed and was up to standard, and therefore the risk to DHEW was ultimately eliminated. But again, that's not the point. The point is that we get the process right, and together we work more closely and more transparently as to where we are with that procurement.
Dear Claire, and I think we can take assurance that significant steps are being undertaken to avoid a repeat of this non-compliance. So thank you for being so open and honest and detailed in terms of outlining those steps, Claire. I can't see any hands up, so dear Julie, for your report. Very, very helpful indeed. So we are asked to note the Procurement and Scheme of Delegation Compliance report, which we do, and thanking you again for your presentation and report.
Thank you.
Diolch. We'll move on then to the final substantive agenda item we have today, which is the Welsh language report. And I'd like to invite Laura, Head of Corporate Governance now, to present this report, providing us with an update on the work undertaken since our last meeting. Croeso eto, Laura.
Diolch, Marion. Yeah, so as always, it's a real pleasure to present our Welsh language report to the committee. So I'll just briefly highlight some key things in the report since the last meeting in February. So in terms of our current Welsh language skills, we now have 42.4 staff with level 1 to 5 skills. So that's really positive. And we have the completion of the Welsh language awareness course now at 93.4%. We have 3.6% of staff who haven't entered skills on ESR. So the Welsh language team are working with directorates to address this. So since the last meeting, we've introduced a Welsh Language Learner of the Year award to the Staff Recognition Awards, and that's been received really positively across the organisation. And we're actually shortlisting later this month for that award. The Welsh language team are developing a refreshed plan and approach to implement a confidence building network across the HW, with the hope of supporting our staff confidence to make more use of their Welsh language skills, regardless of their level in the workplace. And then the Welsh language team have just been working really closely with the People and OD team just to partner with one school in each region. And then the recruitment team are presenting to Careers Wales in June. And we've now agreed to have a presence at several careers events over the coming months. So ranging from Cardiff, Chepstow and Bangor, so trying to get a good presence across Wales. And we are then reviewing options to host an open day in Tŷ Glanyr for school leavers in May. So we're just looking at that and trying to work out what that looks like at the moment. So the report then includes specifically our links to our action plans, the More Than Just Words one and the Welsh Language action plan for DHCW. But that was all that I was going to highlight today, and happy to take any questions if that's okay, Marion.
Diolch, Laura. There's an awful lot going on in this area, and it's just very, very heartening actually to see the good work bearing fruit. There appears to be a sort of shift within the culture of DHCW, and it's significant, I think, when you look back to where we started. So thank you for bringing that assurance to committee. Really pleased to hear the engagement with Careers Wales, actually, because I think this is an important step in terms of attracting more Welsh-speaking school leavers and ultimately graduates, perhaps, into this area. It's really good to hear. And good to hear as well that we're looking across Wales. It's not just in the southeast, and it's very heartening to hear that. Can I just ask you a question about the More Than Just Words? Because clearly there's an action plan and we are making progress in a number of areas. But clearly funding is an issue, and this is a recurrent theme we've heard throughout today's committee meeting, in terms of being able to adequately fund some of those actions that have been identified within the All Wales More Than Just Words framework. Is there anything you'd like to, is there a sense of frustration, I guess, that clearly funding is a barrier to making more progress in some of those areas?
Yeah, so we're lucky in DHW, we chair the All Wales Welsh Language Managers Network. So we do have ongoing conversations really regular with all the managers across NHS Wales. The funding is an issue. We had a meeting with Welsh Government colleagues specifically around the More Than Just Words plan, where the Welsh Language Commissioner attended as well. So we discussed in detail. That was positive in the sense that it was raised and it was acknowledged that we can't do a lot without the funding. So, we haven't been told there will be funding for it. I imagine that there won't be, and we'll still be in the same position. But we are trying to do things to try and address those actions in the funding envelope that we have. And some of the things, I'm grateful that Claire, we work really closely with the finance team in DHW to have a bit of an increase in our own budget. So we try and push that to the things to address the More Than Just Words stuff as well. But I think the biggest one for us is the Master Staff Index, which would be huge across NHS Wales, and I think a lot of health boards would really benefit from that as well, but that's something that we cannot do and will not be able to do without dedicated funds in full.
Diolch, Laura, thanks for that explanation. And I can't see any other hands up, so I've got just one other question, I guess, is about, we're looking at the stats and some of the compliance areas. It'd be really helpful as well for me to hear, or for the committee to hear, a bit more about the softer intelligence and how that culture is shifting, if you like, within the HCW, and other colleagues around the table might want to comment, actually. But that's something maybe for you to think about. I'll take a comment or a question from Marilyn as well, if I may.
I just wanted to say about you talking about the culture. I think sometimes you talk about this confidence building sessions. I just think it's about creating an environment where people just feel happy to use it at whatever level. And I think that takes time, I think, sometimes, and I think that's not appreciated. And I don't think it's helpful, because I heard recently, for instance, Duolingo at a drop in Welsh, because they don't think it's that popular, and that's a bit of a blow, really, because something like Duolingo, where it's free and it's a lot of fun and it's competitive, you know, it is a good way to you know, expand the amount of, you know, audience, and to make it sort of something that people could use more readily. So as I said, I think that there's work that can be done around that, but it does, that culture change is huge, and it does take time. And I think it's an opportunity, and I think, Marion, you've been a fantastic champion around Welsh language, and I think it's just really just being more present in lots of different areas, so people actually see us outside this setting, to help and promote it, really, and support in the future. So just wanted to add that.
Thanks, Marilyn. Would you like to respond then, Laura? And I don't know on the Duolingo, I mean, I'm no authority, but I was by far the language that had the greatest growth, which, you know, is important to note. But yeah, please respond, Laura.
Yeah, diolch, Marion, and thanks, Marilyn. I haven't heard about Duolingo, but I will follow up on that one. In terms of the sort of culture changes, I'll try and sort of incorporate a bit more into the next report that we have. But I think we've been really lucky. We've worked quite closely with the comms team to develop creative writing sessions for our staff, how we use Welsh rather than it being a literal translation, and that's been really welcomed across the organisation. And sometimes it's the little things that mean a lot. So we've got new lanyards, for example, that don't differentiate if you're a learner or you're a fluent Welsh speaker. And, you know, I did a walk around the offices and loads of people were like, oh, brilliant, I'll have one of those. And it just sort of encourages that automatic conversation in Welsh. And then with appointing our in-house translators, we've been able to do a lot more things bilingually. So our staff briefing slides for the first time were bilingual this month, and I think it's that constant drip feed of seeing Welsh in all of our communications, internal and external. You can, I feel it in the organisation, that culture change, but I suppose it's trying to demonstrate that a bit more to people who aren't as close to it, I suppose. So I'll work with that, but yeah, I think the confidence network will be the biggest thing for us, and we're hoping to get a bit more of the competitive things with like Duolingo in our Yammer group and things like that going a bit more as well. So I'll hopefully get a better update, more detailed update at the next meeting, if that's okay.
Thank you, Laura. That's great to hear. Any other comments before I draw this to a close? Claire.
So Paul and I have got this race going in Duolingo, and he's way ahead of me, I hate to say. So we've talked about culture a lot, haven't we, through the audit committee, whether it's quality, legislation, Welsh. So and it's really about how do we embed it and create an environment that people feel comfortable to have a go. So I think just reflecting on and I know that the language team are doing a great job to keep our momentum going, but it's climbing that next step. So I think we've all sort of started to get a basic understanding, but it's then about how do you apply it. And I think it's having the courage and the culture to enable you to just have a go, and it doesn't matter. So I think we just need to think about, I think the key word is how do we really embed our culture with some of these key things so that we can demonstrate it without having to fill in forms or whatever, to say actually you can see it, you can feel it. We've got a long way to go, but yeah, some of the tools that we're using are really helpful to do that.
Thank you, Claire, for those comments. And I can see Paul wants to come in as well. Paul?
Diolch, Marion. Yeah, Claire and I are a bit competitive on Duolingo. I just on the Duolingo, I've just Googled to confirm what my understanding was, and Duolingo have said they're pausing updates to the Welsh module, not scrapping it. So it's still there, it's still available, and I'm on 690-day streak on it. So I'm glad to hear that. And just on the culture piece, really, I mean, I've got 3 fluent speakers in my team, and we try to have as much Welsh dropped into meetings as we can, and certainly whenever Laura and I get together, we use the opportunity to practice our Welsh. So I think the culture is definitely improving across the organisation, but albeit in pockets. But the more we try and speak, the better that will be.
Diolch, Paul. Diolch, Laura. Thank you again for all the hard work that's happening within your team. It's heartening to see that shift. A lot more to do, but we're on a journey, and it's heartening to receive and note the Welsh Language Report for assurance. Diolch yn fawr. So we're getting to the end of today's meeting, and the committee highlight report to board. Anything you want to see flagged within the highlight report, please let me know, but there are some clear areas to include. One is the non-compliance with the SFIs highlighted in the procurement of schema delegation report, which we've just discussed. I also think the benefits from the Audit Wales audit in terms of from firefighting to future-proofing, the challenge for Welsh Public Services. There's a lot in that which we could do with escalating more widely within the organisation, and I think that is something we should include. And also perhaps a reference the fact that DHCW will formally fall under the Future Generations Act of Wales for the first time from this summer. The audit reports as well, the iCare and the programme management, those internal audits as well, we will include in the highlight report. And Claire, clearly in terms of the finance update, the challenges around the DBIF funding, I'm sure there are those areas that you would want us to escalate.
Yeah, and I think it echoes the report from Welsh Audit Office, because they talk about upping the bandwidth on digital transformation, and at the very time that we should be doing that, our digital transformation budget has gone down. So it was a good contrast, I think, unintended, but it's really important that we get that our priorities right going forward, and that we do deliver on that. And I think the other thing that's come out for me has been the importance of building that culture through some of the work that we're doing, and how we how we encourage people to make those links for themselves.
Thank you. And on that very positive note, I'll finalise the highlight report with Chris. And on that very positive note, thank you all for your engagement and contributions, which have been very valued. I think we've had a very good constructive meeting and some very helpful discussions, and received a high degree of assurance in a number of key areas. I've not been notified of any other urgent business. We are scheduled to have a 5-minute break before we reconvene for the private session. Can I just check, Chris? I mean, we are a bit ahead of time. It's not. So do you want to convene the private session slightly earlier? Should we suggest 12:30, or does that pose a problem?
12:30, Marion.
Lovely. We'll reconvene then at 12:30, and noting the date of our next meetings, we have the extraordinary meeting for the draft accounts on the 9th of May, We've heard reference to that from Audit Wales earlier and from Claire. And our next scheduled quarterly meeting will be on the 9th of July 2024. That brings me neatly to the end of our committee meeting. Thank you again for your engagement and contributions, and I'll see some of you in at 12:30. Diolch yn fawr. Debor.